The state budget standoff. Wisconsin still doesn't have a budget, and Republicans who control the Capitol still can't agree on a plan. Some Milwaukee aldermen are pushing Police Chief Edward Flynn to release a federal report about policing in Milwaukee. We look at why this is such a battle. And Democrats are starting to line up to take on Governor Scott Walker in 2018. All that plus winners and losers and your questions today on JS on Politics. Welcome to JS on Politics. I'm your host, Mary Spacuzza. I'm joined in Madison by Patrick Marley and here in the studio by columnist Daniel Bice. So it is late July, and we still don't have a budget.
Supposed to have it done by
late June, by end of June. Patrick, what's the problem?
Well, the problem is that Republicans control all the state government, but they cannot agree on really transportation is the thing that's hanging them up the most. So they're going back and forth over how much we should borrow, if we should do any borrowing at all. They're really stuck, but they say they're continuing to talk and hope to make some progress. They also have some disputes over taxes and education, but those things seem to be really pretty marginal disputes and ones that could easily be resolved once they figure out what to do with transportation. But that one has tied them up going back into last year.
Republicans used to seem so unified at the state capitol. Are those days officially long gone, Bice?
Anytime you have one party in control, the divisions start appearing. And in fact, it's not a new thing. In fact, Scott Walker first made a name for himself in the mid-'90s by opposing a gas tax proposal by Tommy Thompson, who was one of a small group, and in fact blocked it. And he's brought that up several times on the campaign trail the last time he ran about how important it was to be Mr. Anti-Tax. But when you're opposing taxes for transportation, there are very few other places you can go for the money, and one is to borrow. So instead of taxing, you end up borrowing, and Republicans aren't in agreement on that.
Patrick, is there any hope that they're going to be able to work things out anytime soon?
Well, I mean, I don't know that they'll get this done before August 8th. That's when there are a number of bids that are due in southeastern Wisconsin, and when we would really start to feel the effects of this. There's some work on the north-south leg of I-94 and some work on the zoo that could be delayed if they miss that August 8th. I don't want to call it deadline because we're past our deadline, but that benchmark. The governor and Walker and Fitzgerald met. The governor and Speaker Voss and the Majority Leader Scott Fitzgerald met yesterday. They talked for about an hour. They talked about transportation, but Voss came out of that meeting and, he said he thought they were getting to a point to begin negotiations. So they seem to be as far apart as ever.
But this isn't the first time this has happened. It's happened before where they missed the deadline for the new budget. But as we're pointing out, the difference usually is when you had a Republican governor and Democratic legislature.
You kind of expect that sort of thing versus when Republicans control everything. It's interesting when they can't quite get along and can't work it out.
Sure.
I spoke earlier with Ashley Luthern, who's our public safety reporter, about the latest in kind of a recent few weeks of tension between the Milwaukee Common Council and Milwaukee Police Chief Ed Flynn. Here's what she had to say about what the problem is. I'm joined now by Ashley Luthern, our public safety reporter, who's been very busy these days covering the situation with Chief Flynn and the Milwaukee Common Council. So this week we learned that some aldermen are considering hiring outside counsel to get information from the Milwaukee Police Department. How rare is that, and what is going on?
So in the nearly 5 years I've been covering MPD and working in Milwaukee, I haven't heard of the council taking this step before, particularly as it relates to getting information from the Milwaukee Police Department. This is all related to an ongoing federal review of the department by the U.S. Department of Justice. It was a review that Chief Flynn requested back in December of 2015. There have been drafts of this report sent to the Milwaukee Police Department. It's a collaborative process, so they're supposed to provide input back into the report, and then ultimately there's supposed to be an initial assessment with recommendations and findings related to the department. This covers use of force, training, hiring, and other policies and standards within the department. Several aldermen are very concerned because they would like to see a draft of this report, And MPD has said, as of last week, it's not our property. It's the Department of Justice's property, and they say we can't release it. MPD has pledged to to work to expedite the release of this final report. They are asking council members not to make this an adversarial process by hiring outside counsel. And again, that proposal for outside counsel is just a proposal right now.
It seems like an unusual step, and it also seems like it's more than just the report. What is going on between the Common Council and Chief Flynn these days? It seems like a lot of tension.
Yes, as you and I have reported over the past weeks, there's been a lot of public discussion about the police department and the job Chief Flynn has been doing. You saw some aldermen last week start to circulate legislation that would try to give council more power in terms of oversight of the police chief. That would require state approval. But you've also seen the Civilian Fire and Police Commission step up, order Chief Flynn to change his pursuit policy, which for months and actually years, since he made the original change back in 2010, he has said he would not do. He said the policy protects innocent life above all. But the civilian board did say, we think it should be changed based off of all this testimony we received about reckless driving in the city, these rolling drug houses. And then also there was the uproar over the immigration policy as well.
Right. And then where does the Chase policy go from here? I know that they're giving him some timelines or some changes, and it seems like there's been some concern expressed from the chief and the mayor.
Absolutely. So the Fire and Police Commission gave about a 2-week period for Chief Flynn to come back to them with a new policy with some of the revisions they requested and frankly ordered in this directive. The directive can be overruled by the mayor if he issues a written statement basically overruling it. Mayor Barrett's office has not indicated if he intends to do that. However, they've said he's concerned about the issue and wants to meet with the Fire and Police Commission and the police department to discuss this. So we're a little bit in a wait and see pattern, but it certainly was a very direct step that the commission has not taken, again, at least in the years that I've been covering it.
And it sounds like Mayor Barrett talked about reviewing what other cities around the country do and kind of doing more research. So it didn't sound like he was ready to just go along with the change, but I didn't hear that he was going to, overrule it either. So I guess we'll have to wait and see.
Yep.
Thank you so much. Thanks for being here, and we will talk to you soon.
Thanks, Mary.
Thanks.
Republican Governor Scott Walker is going to be facing re-election next year. At first it seemed like there weren't a lot of Dems that wanted to run against him, and now it seems like quite a few are interested. Bice, what's the latest on who might be running?
Well, who said that they weren't running? As you said, for a while
People
there
seem
were
to be jumping. Yes. Former Senator Tim Cullen said, I thought about it, I'm not going to run.
Tauscher, sort of, whatever.
Former Packer, Mark Tauscher, people wanted to draft him to run.
So for a while, as you said, there were 4 or 5, close to a half dozen people who were saying that they weren't going to run. But now we're starting to hear from, and as I counted, I think there are 9 people who are considering it or have announced that they're going to run. The thing is, most of these are not marquee names. They're second and third level people right now, candidates. And so we have Andy Gronick, the Milwaukee businessman, who's announced that he's in. He has a staffer already and is planning to run. Mike McCabe has set up a committee. Mike, the former ethics watchdog, he's filed paperwork and is planning to run. Kathleen Vineout's also changed her paperwork to indicate that
Senator
she's
from Alma.
Right, thinking about running. So you have those 3 out front, and then I heard just yesterday that Tony Evers has hired a staffer, a Madison operative, to help him make the decision. And from what I've been told, they'll have an announcement in September. So those are the 4 people who are at the forefront in terms of running. That doesn't mean they're front runners or anything like that, but those are the first 4.
Patrick, have you heard anything from Madison Mayor Paul Soglin about whether he's getting in? I know he had flirted with that too.
Paul Soglin is looking at this very seriously. He told the Wisconsin State Journal editorial board that he was actively considering it, as well as re-election for mayor. The other person that Dan didn't mention is Dana Wachs, state representative from Eau Claire. He seems to be very serious about possibly running. I don't know what his timeline might be, but certainly giving it some very serious thought. So we could have a huge primary.
Right, and I think it's because there isn't a marquee name. Everybody's looking at the list of names and saying, well,
why not me? Right.
I could run against Dana Wachs or whoever. In fact, there was an interesting poll. I'm not sure what it means, but Milwaukee Works did some extensive polling in Chris Larson's district, one of the most Democratic districts in the state. And
east
side of Milwaukee, and he ran 8 names in that district, and the top 3 were Tony Evers, Paul Soglin, and another name we didn't mention, Matt Flynn, the former state Democratic Party chairman. Those 3 came out on top, and then everybody else was far below those. The former Attorney General candidate Susan Happ got 1%, Dana Wachs 2%. And Malin Mitchell, the firefighters union official who ran as lieutenant governor last time, was at 8%. The only name that wasn't included was Mike McCabe. So it's, again, I'm not sure what it means.
I don't know. It's interesting that Matt Flynn, we were joking that maybe somebody thought it was the former Packer backup quarterback, and everyone loves the Packers.
There are several Matt Flynn's, right. And he did run statewide. I mean, he did run statewide twice. He's run 4 times, lost 4 times. But if this same poll was done in Madison, there would be a completely different set of results.
Got it. Patrick, are you getting a sense that people at the Capitol are unifying against around one person, or not so much?
Well, I think that Dan's right that part of the reason we're seeing so many names is there's not sort of a clear front runner or marquee name out. The other reason I think that you're seeing a lot of Democrats consider it is that they believe the environment will be very good for Democrats with President Trump and Republicans controlling Congress and Republicans having complete control of state government, that there will be a reaction against Republicans at the ballot box in 2018 whenever a party thinks that they're in a better position, then you find that recruiting candidates is easier.
One thing to point out is, for over the last 2 years, the Democrats were not successful at keeping the governor's numbers low. He was, when he announced that he was running for president in early 2015, his numbers dropped down to 38%.
He was stuck at 38% for quite a while,
but
poll
now,
after poll.
Over the last 2 years, he's creeped up now to 48%, which is much closer to where he has been traditionally.
Right. All right, I think it's time for winners and losers, so Governor Walker may come up during that one. Hey, Patrick, who is your winner for the week?
So my winner is going to be Robin Voss. My winners and losers are based on the state budget. Robin Voss is holding out for no borrowing for state roads, and while the budget is stalled, that's what happens. We live on last year's budget until a new budget is passed, and so I would say at this moment he's perhaps better situated on the roads fight.
Like a winner by default. So who's your loser this week?
So as a corollary to that, my loser would be Scott Walker, because as this budget drags on, it's a fight mostly among legislators, but it's making it harder for the governor to advance his agenda. He has said that he is all but certain to run, but he wouldn't make a formal announcement until the budget is done. The longer the budget delay goes on, the more Democrats can say Republicans can't govern and point to the governor's inability to get that finished.
And Dan, who do you have this
Speaking
week for
of Governor Walker, I have Governor Walker as my winner. On the subject that he cares most about, the campaign and re-election, he raised $3.2 million in the first half of the year, and he's sitting on $2.4 million, which is much more than any of the Democrats who are thinking about running.
And that's quite a turnaround from when he was in pretty serious debt, or his campaign was after his presidential bid. Right,
more than $1 million in the hole, and slowly turned that around, and now has more than $2 million in the bank. And last time he spent $30 million. So his side spent $30 million. So, a lot of room to make, a lot of room for improvement, but still, that's a pretty good number.
What about your loser?
My loser has to do with the tough news about Senator McCain. Surprisingly, there's a lot of alt-right people led by Richard Spencer who've been ripping into Senator McCain after the announcement that he had cancer. You saw some of those as well.
Yeah, his tweet, and obviously this is very sad news. McCain, is widely respected by both sides of the aisle, and a lot of people have reached out expressing, sadness and shock over his brain cancer diagnosis, but not Richard Spencer, who tweeted, what was it? Pretty nasty, like basically saying he hoped he died a painful death.
He said that, and that he was responsible for the deaths of millions of people, and it would have been better had he never been born, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, obviously, Spencer loves attention, but this seems to be the worst way possible to get it.
And I usually try to ignore him, but then when you see stuff like that, you kind of wonder, like, how horrible of a person are you, actually? So,
but I saw on Facebook several people taking shots at McCain as well, so it's not just Richard Spencer.
Right.
So.
Okay. All right. Next up is viewer questions. We had quite a few, maybe because we had missed a show over the 4th of July holiday, but we will try to dive into some of these. One of them is from Harold, who says, what is the difference between Donald Trump Jr. meeting a Russian lady compared to the Washington Post or New York Times meeting with the same person, expecting to get the same scoop on Hillary Clinton? So I think the question goes on from there, but I think we could break to say, what's the difference between meeting with a representative of a foreign government to help your own election?
We had a very similar question last week. Mm-hmm. I mean, the difference is, one, that Donald Trump is president now, mm-hmm. And there's a big difference between a newspaper doing it and the leader of the free world doing it. And then secondly, we don't know how those newspapers would react. I'm assuming newspapers receiving information from, in particular, Russia offering critical information would contact authorities about that to say, that we've got a problem here.
Okay. Patrick, do you want to weigh in on that one?
Well, I mean, I would just add to what Dan said to say that when a political figure meets with an agent of a foreign government and then becomes in power, wins election, then they're in a position where they can treat that foreign power favorably or unfavorably. The newspaper would not have an equivalent amount of power. That's something you have to sort of consider in all of that as well.
It's interesting because a few of our questions seem to also be asking why we're not investigating Hillary Clinton as carefully as we are President Trump. I think the president kind of...
Someone was a loser and someone was not.
Correct.
And someone has access to an incredible amount of power, and Hillary Clinton doesn't at this time.
Right. The president tag is a big difference.
And
there.
It's not as if there was not a lot of negative information going on about Hillary Clinton during the campaign.
We got a new question about the Trump family. This one says, Donald Trump Jr. and others are to testify next week. Why does it only take a few weeks for Republicans to testify and only a few years for any investigation of the Democrats? Boy, it's almost like the same person sending us questions. Anyhow, so again, I think that the issue might be who's president and who's in control. But do you want to weigh in on that one anymore?
No, I mean, it's an attempt to do what's called a false equivalency, to say what's the difference between these two. But Republicans are in control in Washington as they are here, and when you win in elections, there's greater scrutiny of what you're doing.
Here's one from Kelly that it looks like came in today. It says, do you think it was brilliant that Governor Walker did not accept federal funds for the Obama insurance program? And goes on from there. Do either of you guys want to weigh in on whether or not states or Governor Walker made the right call there? Patrick?
Yeah, I mean, I'll respond to that. Governor Walker and Republicans in the legislature were very resistant to Obamacare. They found a way to expand Medicaid without taking the additional federal money, not expanding it as fully as Obamacare would have allowed. I think it remains to be seen whether that was a smart decision or not. For the long term, Republicans say it shows a strong resistance to Obamacare and that we're not creating a program that we can't fund long term. Democrats say it's foolish to leave what amounts to hundreds of millions of dollars, or probably more than $1 billion now, on the table, and that it would be a good way to help secure the rest of Wisconsin's budget. The reason I say it's a little bit unknown, things are in such flux at the federal level right now. It appears they're not going to be able to repeal Obamacare, which means that this would continue into the long term, that states like Ohio that expanded it would continue to get that federal money, and that they would get far more money than we will. At the same time, I don't know that you can entirely count Mitch McConnell out. The federal government, the Congress could come back and repeal Obamacare, and then at that point, those other states that had expanded would find this huge gap in their budget that Wisconsin would not.
But, since they started the process, now John McCain looks like he might not be around for a while, so that means even fewer Republicans have to oppose whatever deal they come up with in the Senate. So that just adds one more hurdle for the Senate Republicans.
It certainly seemed to have been trickier than President Trump thought it would be on the campaign trail when he was saying that they were going to, quickly repeal Obamacare and that the new plan would be.
Well, they've been saying that for 7 years.
Right.
So, but it's easy to pass bills saying we're going to repeal Obamacare when the president's going to veto it, as President Obama did on a number of occasions. It's a lot harder to replace it, particularly when the program's already in place. It's difficult when people have received some sort of government benefit to take it away than it is to put it in place to begin with.
One question that came in is, last March I asked about the wiretapping surveillance of Trump Towers by Obama. Anything new?
I'm assuming if there's anything new, it'll probably come. I mean, there's been no announcements or anything suggesting that there's anything new on that.
I assume that would come from the intelligence community
or testimony before the Senate, but there's not been any follow-ups on that.
Okay. Well, I think that's it for this week's show. So please send us your questions, and we'll try to get to them, and maybe just send one or two. All right. Thanks a lot for your time.